Today we are finally taking out my Yamaha XS650 that's been parked for a very long time because of some weird issues we've been having with it, and finally the bike is basically ready to go. For those who have been following with the channel, we talked about my XS in the last channel update where I was going through all the bikes that were sitting here, but realistically the last time we actually have seen the bike running, riding and all of that was way early at the beginning of this year when the bike was still down in Texas. The bike was brought up middle of summer, but unfortunately somewhere in between the time of me riding it and the bike getting transported, the bike no longer wanted to start up, which kind of snowballed into what we have now, and the bike is finally almost done. My other 75 Yamaha has also kept me pretty busy with all the work that this bike needs that I haven't worked on the other bike. But here is my 75 XS650. This bike currently is still semi-taken apart, working on it just kind of right here because there's a bike on the table that I haven't shown you guys yet. But as we can see here, the carburetors are back onto the bike, which last time you guys saw the bike, the carburetors were off of it, but the airbox is still partially disassembled. Now, I made a video going through my entire motorcycle collection a few months ago. In that video, we talked about the carbs on this bike. For certain years of the XS650, Yamaha decided to put the jets of the carburetors built into the bowls rather than the body of the carburetors. And the 75, that happens to be the case. And you know, the thought behind it isn't that bad. They're pretty easy to service, but the problem is this bike only has about 7,500 miles on it. The bike had been sitting for a few years. The gas might have been a little bit old. Again, the bike was halfway across the country, so I didn't have time to actively look at it. So what ended up happening is the carbs were already kind of gummed up. Even when I was riding it, it wasn't riding 100%. It was smoking a little bit because the carbs had a ton of buildup inside of them. We went ahead and cleaned the entire bodies and the bowls of the carburetors, but unfortunately the left side carburetor, as I said, the jets are in the bowl. The jets had cemented themselves into the bowl of the carburetors. Instead of the jets coming out of the carbs, the jets started to strip and it was hard to get them out. At this point, we kind of were left with a couple of options, and my best option was to go out and find a new bowl and just put new jets in the carburetors. But finding the bowl was pretty hard. I mean, I could not find a second bowl. Then we decided to get a little creative, use some mystery oil and some other things to kind of sit there and eat the corrosion a little bit, use a ton of heat, and finally get those jets out of the bowl. And then finally, when we got the jets out of the bowl, we finally had a clear bowl, cleaned it up again. Now, I wasn't present when the carburetor jets got out of the bowls, so I unfortunately did not get to record any of that process. What that finally meant is I could finally order some new jets, get the new jets, put brand new jets in both of the carbs, and the bike should be able to fire back up. And that's exactly what we did. We have the carburetors back onto the bike. The intake boots are still off because we still have to do some final tuning to the bike. I also am a little impatient and I really just want to ride the bike and hear it run. We heard it run here in the garage and we're gonna try doing its first test flight before we get it 100% dialed in. So here we go. We have it outside. Got my CB750 back. This bike's been in storage for like a month and a half now as well, which is going to go back into storage soon enough with this bike as well. For those wondering, yes, this piece is still loose. Before she goes into storage, well, make sure to dial it in. The one thing it's going to need is new fuel lines. These fuel lines are old, but if we do come here and turn it on, we got gasoline going in there. We have a black line so you can't see it on this side because I replaced that one. But we turn it on and we should have gas. We got choke. That should be choke on here. Now, these bikes tend to have weaker starters. Yamaha has always struggled with starters, especially in the early days. So what we're going to do is kickstart it instead of using the electric start. Fires right into that. A little bit of throttle. You can hear how bad that starter sounds. You can hear the misfire. Right now it seems to only be running on a single, but all these old bikes, if you let them sit, don't properly store them, they're always going to have weird fussy issues, and well, that's the reason why so many of them kind of got a bad name for themselves, including Old British Bike. Old British Bikes are fantastic, but they got a bad name for themselves because they do leak a little bit of oil, and they weren't necessarily bad in their day. They were just too expensive, and the companies couldn't keep up with the Japanese ones because things like electric start. Perfect example is literally the XS's competition, the Bonneville right here, but we'll get into that in the next video when we compare the two. For now, let's go take it for a ride. Nothing too crazy because it's behaving a little bit worse than it was the other day, but maybe with a little bit of heat into it, it might perform a little bit better. And for the comments that do say, especially with my RD350, oh, you're gonna ruin the bike, I pray for that bike. Nothing's gonna happen to the bike. There's no harm, no bikes were hurt in the making of any of my videos.
See, the bike wants to run like fine at times, but on idle and sitting, it does not like to just be parked or anything. She does not like to sit idle, but under acceleration, and the bike's all there, it runs really nicely as well. This is a really nice bike. I can't wait to have it dialed in fully. Next summer, springtime, we're definitely gonna ride it and put some appropriate miles on it, because 6,500 miles in a little shy of 50 years is what this bike has got on it. That is original mileage, original paint, original chrome on this bike. When I saw it in such nice condition, I knew I had to have it. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but like just trying to maintain speed, it does want to be a little choppy, but when you get it accelerating, it accelerates just fine. I also think this handlebar is tipped down a little bit. That's just something that can be adjusted really quickly. You got to give it a little gas, a little throttle. You can tell that the carbs are a little out of sync. Don't want to go crazy, but it pulls nice. Idles on the two of them are off, which is why it wants to be revved up a little bit. But I have complete confidence in the bike to go on some main roads. This is probably the longest ride I'm ever going to be going on this bike here. I can definitely understand why Yamaha is very successful with this bike. Compared to the British bikes, it had electric start, it had modern day amenities like turn signals at an appropriate time. The British companies like Triumph, mainly the Bonneville, which is kind of what this bike was competing with because of that 360-degree crank, which means both the pistons go up and down at the same time and aren't individual, like one's down, one's up. I believe the Hondas have 180-degree crankshafts, but signature, and the reason why it sounds like an old British bike is because of that crankshaft.
And there we have it. It's nice and warm. The bike performed pretty decently. The one thing we got to look at right here is the difference between the idle, because I believe the idles are off. And if I do come to the other side here, we should be able to, raise the idle on the left side, and it should idle a little bit better than it did before. There you have it. It's starving from gasoline right now. It's starving. Carbs don't have gas in the bowls, but you could hear that idle sounded a lot healthier. I believe there's a vacuum process that you can do with these carbs as well. You can vacuum, tune, and sync them together. There's 2 individual throttle cables on them, so it's not the hardest thing in the world to get dialed in right, and we're going to be doing that at some point, but I'm just happy the bike is semi-rideable, and I can actually put it through the heat cycle, and it's not just a sitting brick right now. Crazy to see a bike this old, this nice, all original. I mean, for the price these are going for right now, sub 5,000 for a very nice bike. I mean, there's not really too much beating it in the price category, because most of these older bikes have been junked, and you can still get a nice XS for a couple of $1,000s. I'm not sure exactly when the bike had a ton of miles put on it, whether it was early in its life or later in its life. I assume that most of the riding was done in the early times. And I'm looking at these tire stickers right now, and I believe this should be the date
and these tires here are from 2000. There's a 7500 there. I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up. Right there, 7500. That leads me to believe it could be 2010, I think. It could also be 2020, if I'm not wrong. I think it just means that the year ends in a 0, so these could be from 2020. They look a little too nice to be 14 or even 24 years old. So maybe it was updated a little bit and cleaned up during the pandemic. I mean, clearly someone, the previous owner, the original owner, had it parked nicely. I mean, he literally had this motorcycle parked underneath a blanket in his living room, so there's that. I just want to make a little bit of an update with this bike. You guys haven't seen it in a long time. I haven't rode it in a long time. I've just been seeing this bike without the tank, without the carbs for forever. I'm going to slap this boot back on and we're going to adjust the carbs, and if I have to vacuum sync them, we will make a video on them. I know unfortunately I couldn't really walk through the process and show everything that happened when we took the carbs out and the bowls and everything because I wasn't there. My dad did a majority of the heavy lifting and I did some of the cleaning when we first took them off, so maybe I have footage of that you guys might have seen earlier. With all of that being said though, if you want to catch the other videos on this XS, make sure to click here, and if you want to store your motorcycle for winter, click here, so make sure you do it right.